This is John Howell Essential Cuts, your daily rundown of the best from today's show on 890 WLS.
Well, the hurricane moved quickly through Florida, and I think it's over Georgia as we speak, barreling towards the Carolina coast. Made landfall on the Big Bend section of Florida. Let's start there with Jim Ryan, ABC News correspondent. He is in Tampa. Jim, thanks much for your time. Pretty quick trip over Florida, wasn't it?
Well, it really was, yeah. It just had the panhandle to clear. The Big Bend area is where it came in, John. That's right where the panhandle meets up with the peninsula, a relatively unpopulated area, which was great because you had a 16-foot storm surge when the storm with 125-mile-an-hour winds came in, made landfall, and then went racing up to Georgia. And you're right, it's causing problems wherever it goes. Tornado warnings have been posted around South Carolina because some twisters have been spotted in advance of Idalia's arrival there.
Fatalities?
ABC News has learned of one fatality at least, a person who was driving a pickup truck at the height of the storm earlier today in Pasco County, Florida, lost control, ran into a tree, and was killed. Now, the governor has said that he's got no confirmation of any fatalities or casualties at all. He says those have to come to him from the state law enforcement, from the state medical examiner. So undoubtedly we will have at least one, maybe more. But it's nothing at all like we had last year with Hurricane Ian, John. Remember that one? We had 161 people killed.
And that one seemed to just hang over Florida, Naples, and that area of Florida for the longest time. This one was very quick. What about a storm surge?
There was a storm surge out there at the point of landfall, up there in the Big Bend area, 16-foot storm surge estimated. We also had a storm surge down here in Tampa. This area didn't get a direct hit, but even as the storm was brushing by and headed north, it was pushing water up into Tampa Bay. The bay level was actually rising, even though it was low tide, which was interesting. So there was some street flooding that happened here. So the causeways started having water over them. Tampa Bay, they were closed. So there was that storm surge effect. A place like Cedar Key as well got both a storm surge and a lot of wind damage.
Why is this so sparsely populated?
Well, there's just not much there. I mean, this is a marshy area. It's just a place where you don't see a lot of settlement. The nearest town is Perry, about 30 miles inland. The governor now has visited that place today to look at some of the damage, and there was damage there. But it didn't even sustain storm or surge damage because it's so far inland, and it's high enough that it didn't get that kind of storm surge. But it did get wind damage, and it got damage from the deluge that the Idalia brought with it.
Any early estimate of damage dollar-wise?
Not at all, not yet. And we'll have to see. But I think the cumulative damage from the storm from Florida, from Georgia, and from the Carolinas, once the storm moves away, we'll get some kind of an assessment. It'll be expensive, but it won't be anything like last year's Ian. And
you said the governor was he had boots on the ground, did he, today? Do you know?
Yes, he was out there. He went out to Perry. He took a look around, met with local officials there. Has been monitoring this as well. He was doing a briefing this morning from the Emergency Operations Office in Tallahassee, and the power went out very briefly there during that event. This was right as the storm was coming in. So, yeah, even the governor's office wasn't immune from the power outages.
I'll bet you a dime to a dollar, Jim, that he was never wearing white boots.
I doubt it. You're right.
Yeah. Thank you for the update. Much appreciated,
right,
sir.
Take care.
Take care.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's a blue moon. Tonight, I'm reading from Steve Zalewski's piece here at the Daily Herald. The phrase once in a blue moon refers to something that happens rarely. Say a Chicago Bears Super Bowl victory or a Chicagoan putting ketchup on the hot dog. But the blue moons are not quite as rare as the idiom might have you believe. Let's start there with our next guest who joins us from the Adler Planetarium, and she's a returning guest. I love experts on this program. Director of Public Observing at the Adler, Michelle Nichols is here. Michelle, welcome back to the Big 89. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So what exactly is a blue moon by definition?
Well, there's two definitions, but the one that refers to the blue moon this evening is the second full moon in a calendar month. And it has to do with the quirk of our solar-based calendar. If you have a full moon at the very beginning of the month, the moon has enough time to go around the Earth again, so you get a full moon at the end of the month.
Okay. And how often normally in a year does a blue moon take place?
So you get one of these calendar blue moons about once every 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
So the next one, the next calendar blue moon after this one will be May 31st of 2026. So,
okay, not so far off. But what makes tonight's blue moon noteworthy is it's also what's called a supermoon. What is that?
So the moon's orbit around the Earth is not a perfect circle. So sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's farther. And when the moon's orbit, when it's at its close point, coincides with the time of full moon.
Yeah.
Yep, with the time of full moon, then that is given the term supermoon. It could also be when it coincides with new moon, but you don't see new moon, so we don't have to worry about that one.
So tonight is a super blue.
Yep.
Which also, by the way, coincidentally, is the name of a great Freddie Hubbard album, Super Blue. You're no doubt familiar with that.
I am not, but you always give me really interesting music tidbits to look up, so I can definitely check that out afterwards.
Cosette, if you could give me a meaty portion of Freddie Hubbard's Super Blue at your earliest convenience. Thank you. Skip the long intro, just from the melody. You'll know what I speak after you listen to it. Thank you. We'll get back to that. So the next super blue moon, that doesn't happen until 2037, so enjoy tonight.
Correct, yeah, but there'll be blue moons between now and then. There will be super moons between now and then. But the next time is January 31st of 2037. So yeah, and by the way, for that particular one, there is also a lunar eclipse that evening. So that will be a lot of fun as well.
Does any of this have to do with global warming?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Very good. So,
but there is a little bit of a tie-in to the hurricane, because when you do have a supermoon, or when the moon is at its close point to Earth, you can get a little bit greater high tide, especially for full moon. You can get a greater high tide. And so the high tide is happening this afternoon when the hurricane is at its worst in Florida. So that does have an effect on things like storm surge.
I heard somebody talk about this earlier, but I didn't catch the details. So, yeah, the moon is participating in that as well. Will there be a difference in size when we look at it tonight? There is. It's only maybe 7 or 8%. So if you don't notice a difference in size, that's okay. You may not. It's not that much of a difference in size. You might notice a difference in brightness. So it will be a little bit brighter. Again, if you don't notice it, it's okay. The moon is going to be taking kind of a low path through the night. So that's going to cut down a little bit on its overall brightness also. But so, yeah, you may or may not notice a difference in size. You may or may not notice a difference in brightness. So the moon, I think, is about 250,000 miles away. It'll be 18,000 miles closer tonight than normal. Closer than normal. So from its kind of average distance. Okay. So the moon tonight is somewhere around, I don't know the exact one. It's like 220,000 miles. Somewhere around there. Moonrise is about 7:42 tonight. When's the best time to look out in the southeast horizon for this? Anytime you can actually see it when it gets up above any local clouds or trees or buildings that you might have in your area. So your best time to look will kind of depend on where you are. But if you want to maybe look for when it's at its peak time, when it's the exact moment of full moon, if you're interested in that, that's 8:35 p.m. Central Time. And if you're close to the lake, you can look over the lake, and that might be a good way to see it. It might be. There are some clouds over the lake this afternoon and this evening. I was looking earlier. There may be some breaks. So, yeah, those folks out maybe to the west or south or north where it might not be quite as cloudy, you might have a little bit better view. And it won't look bluish, will it? No. The term doesn't refer to the color, but
the moon can be tinged with blue if you've got the right size smoke particles in the sky, for example, like from a forest fire. But no, that won't be the case for us this evening. And
the Adler will be open tonight, and you're going to have your YouTube channel viewing this beginning at 9 o'clock, correct?
That's correct. So we call it Sky Observers Hangout. It's a lot of fun. We do it youtube.com/Adler Planetarium. It's open for anyone to watch. And if you want, you can send us questions in the YouTube chat. So we would love to know that you're out there, you're listening, you're watching. And if you have any questions about the moon, let us know. And what's the next big event we should be preparing for? Whether it's an eclipse of the sun or the moon, or what's the next big event that we should put on our calendars now? The next one is the one we have been preparing for months and months and months. It is a solar eclipse, a partial solar eclipse on Saturday, October 14th. And it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have telescopes outside here at the Adler that day. It happens in the morning and into the early afternoon. But yeah, Saturday, October 14th, 2023. Mark it on your calendar because that's going to be our next big event. And am I to take a government jet and fly to Fort Knox so I get a better view? Actually, if you want to take the government jet, you might want to fly maybe to Albuquerque. That'll be a nice view. Okay. Michelle Nichols, thanks. We'll be watching tonight again on YouTube, the Adler Planetarium channel. Take a look at the super blue moon. Michelle, thanks for your time. Much appreciated. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
This is John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Well, it's still not clear exactly where that bullet came from.
It's not clear where the bullet came from. There are no reports of any gunshots in our ballpark.
But our acting superintendent is still investigating this shooting from last Friday at 35th and Billvick Drive.
We're dispelling a lot of things. It's coming from outside is something that we've almost completely dispelled, but we're still looking at every avenue. It's still under investigation. Something from inside, it could have happened that way, but we're looking at every avenue, exploring every lead and everything that we get, we're exploring that.
Okay. Well, with Chicago police saying it's most likely the gunfire that struck two women Friday, fourth inning, at a White Sox game originated inside the ballpark, a lawyer now for one of those injured has issued a statement disputing any notion that his client brought any weapon in any way, shape, manner, or form through security and accidentally fired it. That woman, treated for leg wounds, found herself under scrutiny as police continue to unravel what happened. We discussed this yesterday with Rick Tellender of the Sun-Times, and Peggy Kaczynski had originally said that the woman smuggled the gun in the folds of her physique. Well, let's start there with Sam Charles. He's the man who covers the Chicago Police Department for your Chicago Tribune. Sam, let's start. Would you please tell us about the woman who's still under scrutiny?
Well, John, in recent days since the shooting occurred Friday, there have been various reports from several different media outlets who have been, I don't necessarily want to say peddling in rumors, but there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the circumstances of what happened. And there's been a general lack of clarity as far as how the shooting unfolded, where the shots came from, and who is ultimately responsible for it. So with that in mind, there have been some published reports suggesting that one of the two women who were shot was the person who brought a firearm somehow into Guaranteed Rate Field on last Friday evening.
Is the phrase concealed in the folds of the fat still in play?
I can just say, based on my own reporting, that has not been put on my radar yet. I cannot personally confirm that reporting myself now.
So her attorney says she denies bringing the firearm into the stadium, even though, if I'm correct, she had a FOID card, right?
According to the police incident report from Friday night, the 42-year-old woman who suffered what sounds to be the more severe injuries has a valid firearm owner ID card. Now, her attorney, as you mentioned, yesterday evening issued a statement on her behalf in which her attorney denied that his client had anything to do with the firearm being brought inside Guaranteed Rate Field. He explicitly said that she had nothing to do with the firearm discharge. She had no gun on her when she walked in. And furthermore, she's a season ticket holder, according to her lawyer.
So she's the 42-year-old woman, and you say she lives in the west suburbs. The other woman who suffered a graze wound, she's 26. She lives in the city. She works for the Chicago Public Schools. Does she have a lawyer, and has she also denied bringing the gun in?
I personally have not been in touch with the other woman. However, there's another report published earlier today in which that woman, the CPS teacher, her brother spoke out and said that they had heard a loud pop while they were sitting in the bleachers. And apparently the two women who were struck by bullets were not sitting in the same row. They were seated a decent distance away from each other. She has not, as best to my knowledge, she has not made any public statements, and it's unclear if she has retained counsel herself.
So it would be illegal if either of these women had the gun inside White Sox Park. They're not concealed carry permit holders, either one of them, to our knowledge. So the 42-year-old who was hit and more severely injured, they didn't find a weapon on her. Obviously, that'd be part of the initial news reports, wouldn't it?
It's unclear where the gun is that was used in this entire incident. Earlier this week on Monday, interim police superintendent Fred Waller held a brief media availability after a CPD recruit graduation ceremony at Navy Pier. And, he said that it's investigators as of Monday believe that the strong likelihood that the shots originated from inside the park. However, he was pretty adamant in saying that all avenues are still being explored. And, as we're speaking now on Wednesday afternoon, it's still very much an ongoing and active investigation.
Sam, I wonder if the White Sox are going over videotape of the crowd looking for people after the incident happened who skedaddled.
I mean, yeah, the park is full of surveillance and security cameras. So, mapping someone's movements in and around the park is certainly feasible, and it stands to reason that both the White Sox staff and Chicago Police Department investigators are combing through that very closely.
Has the performer who was scheduled to offer up the post-game concert, has Vanilla Ice made any comment?
He posted a video to social media the day after the incident occurred, and obviously he was quite supportive of the city, and was generally speaking, urging unity among the city itself. And he was apologetic, and he certainly seemed like he was looking forward to performing. But as you mentioned, unfortunately, the post game concert was canceled after the game. The game itself was allowed to continue on despite a request from the CPD that it be halted. However, unfortunately, as you mentioned, the concert featuring Vanilla Ice, something had to be cut apparently, and that was it.
Sam, Charles, do you get the sense that this is still an active investigation, or has the CPD kind of turned the page, cold case time?
This certainly feels very active and ongoing. Obviously, in the city of Chicago, anybody can tell you that gun violence is an all too common occurrence. However, when there is an instance of gunfire in a crowded sporting event, it certainly raises questions. Like ostensibly there are supposed to be spaces in our city and in our world where this isn't the kind of thing that should be worried about. But, unfortunately, Friday was a reminder that, there's more that can be done to ensure the safety of anybody, at any given moment. And, especially at a sporting event with thousands of people, it certainly raises some questions as to what the protocols were and how they were followed.
I hate to be part of the problem as opposed to part of the solution, but I feel a bit chagrined about my silliness yesterday with the phrase smuggled in the folds of the fat. I feel like I may have taken that a little too far yesterday.
Again, John, my reporting personally, I cannot confirm that. So I'm, like I said, that's not something that I've been able to confirm or heard too much of.
Well, that's because, Sam, you're a journalist. I'm a talk show host. It's a different gig.
Oh, that's funny.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. I'll read more in the Tribune, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you, John.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
It's Mike Emanuel time, Fox News Chief D.C. Correspondent. He'll be in the anchor chair, high noon on Sunday our time. Special report for Brett Baer, 5 o'clock on Labor Day. Mike, good afternoon. How are you, sir?
John, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you. Thanks so much. I know your time's very valuable. I thought it was gracious what Biden said about McConnell, but certainly people are noticing Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein, John Fetterman, and yes, of course, President Biden.
Yeah. It adds to the argument for either term limits or some kind of age requirement, because clearly, and I don't have any ill will toward McConnell or Feinstein. They've always been professional with me. But I think a lot of these folks have a hard time just knowing when time is up, like when it's just time to go enjoy whatever time you have left with your family, with your loved ones, do whatever you like. They have a hard time giving up power and prestige. And so maybe at some point the system needs to be able to tell them, okay, why don't you go sail off and enjoy your retirement?
You know, Fetterman, look, he's much younger than the other three, so
Sure.
I'll give him a benefit of a doubt that he had a terrible stroke and it's debilitating, but it hasn't put him out of the game. So, you know, he can, as long as he can discharge the duties of his office, and that's up to the people in Pennsylvania, fine.
Sure.
But did you see the poll that Democrats, 70% of Democrats think Biden is too old to stand for re-election?
Yeah, they're freaking out because, you know, you can see it. He's not the same guy he was 5 years ago. Certainly not the same guy he was 10 years ago. Father Time catches us all, right, John? So, I mean, it's not being disrespectful. It's just reality. Age in your 80s, you're supposed to be on a porch enjoying your life, or at the beach, or with your grandkids, or on a golf course, or whatever makes you happy. Go enjoy your life. But, like, being leader of the free world, I think a lot of folks think it should be a much younger person in better health on top of their game. And so Democrats are freaking out because, out of respect, more viable candidates are not jumping in. And so it creates a dilemma for them.
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, I don't understand why it's baked in the cake so much on that side of the world that he's the only guy that can beat Donald Trump, the presumptive nominee. I don't see that logic. I mean, 85 million people voted against Donald Trump, not necessarily for Joe Biden last time around. I don't know why he just doesn't say, okay, my card has been punched. I'm not endorsing the VP. I'm not endorsing anybody until after the Democratic convention, but I'm done. I've done my duty. See you later. I don't understand why he's so reticent to do that.
Unless he does it. You know, maybe he late this fall says, you know what, it's been a great run. Let somebody else do it. And so you see Gavin Newsom, your governor, a few other people suddenly jump in and see if they can capture magic. But I think it may be another sign of, you know, once you have power, it's really hard to give it up. And so unless a family member comes to him and says, time's up, he may very well go for another term.
He should also say, look, my son's in trouble, and I'm gonna step aside to eliminate this as being a distraction for the Democrats. I'm going to go help my son. See you later. I'll be in Delaware writing my memoirs.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always a president, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Elite club. You serve one term, you serve 2 terms, you're still former president. Yeah. And you still get the entourage escorting you everywhere you go.
Yeah, some entourage is larger than others.
Yeah, sure.
Mike Emanuel is here from Fox News. According to this new Emerson College polling survey, Nikki Haley saw the largest increase in support after the Fox debate. She went up 5 points. Do GOP insiders think she's a real contender?
She's got a long way to go, but I think a lot of the D.C. Beltway Republican types were very impressed by her performance the other night with 8 candidates on stage. It's not easy to stand out. She was strong. She was articulate. I think a lot of folks give her credit for being honest on abortion. You know, there are not 60 pro-life votes in the United States Senate. And so finding, you know, as much common ground on life issues in Congress is the way to go. And so I think she got a lot of credit for being fast on her feet in terms of foreign policy, on the passionate issue of abortion on both sides, a very passionate issue. And so she got a bump, and we'll see if she can build on that.
Well, she's stuck with a Republican, Republican point that it's a state's issue. So, people in Kansas aren't going to feel the same way as people in Massachusetts. So that's where they were for 30 years. I don't know why everybody has to pivot to a federal law now. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise diagnosed with a blood cancer. He's had a rough go since the shooting. What's the latest on Congressman Scalise?
Everybody I've talked to sounds hopeful, optimistic that it's a highly treatable form of cancer, but you're absolutely right. I was covering the Hill when he was shot and nearly died. I was there the day he came back to Capitol Hill walking with those crutches. I covered him all through all of the surgeries he went through, and it's been quite a long road. And so to hear that he has cancer now, you feel for the guy, your heart goes out to him. Hope and pray that he makes a full and speedy recovery.
Who's the Democrat who's wearing the do-rag now, for lack of a better descriptor, also has cancer? I forgot his name.
Jamie Raskin of Maryland, who was one of the impeachment managers when Trump was in office and is the top Democrat right now on House Judiciary, if memory serves.
And what's the status on him? Gosh, as we get older, all we talk about is health.
Yeah, he seems to be doing well. Just, the hair obviously took a hit with all the cancer treatment, so he's got the Steven Van Zandt look with the scarves.
It is not a good look. I'm sorry. We all understand that you're going through treatments. Okay, we've seen it before. You don't need the Steve Van Zandt thing. It works for Stevie Van Zandt on stage. I don't think it works for a congressman. My own thoughts there.
I guess he figures if it works for the E Street Band, what the heck?
I guess. Retired Army General David Petraeus. I have a lot of respect for the guy.
Sure.
He complimented the Ukrainian military, which is we don't hear that very often, for their counteroffensive. He said the Army has adapted very impressively. Is he in the minority, and is D.C. still confident about Ukraine's chances?
I think a lot of people feel like Ukraine is stuck right now, and it's kind of a stalemate between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and a lot of stuff's being fired back and forth, and there's a lot of devastation, but not necessarily regaining territory from the other army. And so I think there are a lot of folks here in Washington who may be losing some patience, getting a little tired of the blank check for Ukraine. Even if it's on the right side of history, they're just wondering, how do you make significant progress to bring this war to an end? And so, I respect the heck out of General Petraeus. He knows, or he's forgotten more about war than I will ever know. So if he says that, that's great. But I think a lot of other folks here are really wondering if the Ukrainians are going to be able to win this thing.
Did you ever see the Brad Pitt movie based on Petraeus?
Yes.
I forgot the name of it, but I thought it was pretty well done.
Absolutely.
And finally, Dana Perino, your colleague, she co-hosts America Reports and The Five. She guest hosted Tuesday's edition of Gutfeld, and I thought she roasted him and other colleagues. She's quite talented, isn't she?
She's a rock star, and in fact, it was just announced today that she's going to do the Fox Business debate September 27th, and so I've known Dana, I've known Dana a long time when she was at the Bush White House, and she's a great person. She's super talented, and I think she does a phenomenal job on whatever she sets her mind to. And so whether it's Gutfeld or a Republican presidential debate, she's mighty talented.
Is she doing that solo?
She's doing it with Stuart Varney of the mighty Fox Business. And I forget who the person is from the partner network. Forgive me for that. But it caught my eye that it's Dana and Varney, and should be quite a show.
Do you think Stuart Varney gets more credit for being smart just based on his English accent?
He is smooth. I could listen to him read the phone book. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. I always feel those guys get a few extra points just based on the accent.
It certainly does sound like it raises the IQ. There's no doubt about that.
Are you going to be able to swing the clubs this Labor Day weekend?
I certainly hope so. I got high noon on Sunday. I got special report Monday, but would love to squeeze a little time in on the golf course. How many under par are you currently? I got a long way to go, Big John. You're single digits, though, right? I mean, honestly. I got into the game 5-6 years ago, so I still got a long way to go. But I love it. Yeah, me too. I started when I was 54.
So that was pretty late, but I must say I really love it, and I feel like I just figured something out, about keeping you're a righty, right?
Yes.
Okay. Keeping your right elbow pasted to your side on the takeaway, the old Ben Hogan, way, keep the elbows pasted. And I just finally figured that out. And then my hoof went bad again, so I'm on injured reserve during all this great weather.
Well, wishing you a full and speedy recovery and get you back out on the course.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. Have a great week.
Thank you, John.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
John Howell, Essential Cuts. Check back every weekday for another episode of John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.